Hi, Doc Martin for KRAZ TV. This is the Zero channel because some of these stories are, well, I don't know if they're adult issues, but they get pretty testy here. Well, this new book review and new book that I got is called Cadillac Desert, the American West and the Disappearing Water. It's by Marc Reisner. This guy wrote this way back in the 80s, and he went around and interviewed all these people for this book, and he passed away in the year 2000, but he did do this rewrite from 1986. So it starts up at Washington all the way down through Texas, but Canada is mentioned quite extensively in here. Oh. It really started, well, Powell went down the Colorado River, and he really stuck his 2 cents in worth and became a bureaucrat in Washington and really started working on water problems in the United States back in the 1800s. So yeah, he was Marc Reisner, 48 to 2000, was, in Jim Harrison's words, in the upper echelons of those defending the environment with conscience, intelligence, and energy. Born in St. Paul, he was a 1970 graduate of Earlham College in Indiana, a staff writer for Natural Resources Defense from 72 to 79. He received an Alicia Peterson Journalism Fellowship to investigate water resources in the West, so that's how he came to write this book. His book, Cadillac Desert, the American West and Its Disappearing Water, in 1986 was acclaimed as a definitive work on the West's water crisis. Now, he was when he passed away, Lawrie Mott, formerly an environmental health scientist with Natural Resources Defense Council, lives in the Bay Area. That county receives all its water from local supplies. She co-wrote Pesticide Alert, a guide to pesticides in fruits and vegetables. And she wrote the afterword, and she made some additions here for later than after 2000. After Marc Reisner, her late husband, she learned from Marc Reisner, so I guess they married. She learned about water in the West at their dinner table and took long drives through western states. She received her BA from the University of California at Santa Cruz and her MS from Yale. So this family has been on the road telling the story, and it really, I don't know. There was so much in here about California, I got to thinking there was a lot of stories about how California, because they intruded on everybody and demanded rights, and we live here in Arizona, and I did not know that the Central Arizona Project, the CAP, was envisioned since 1940, and we didn't get it built until 70s or something. And that's how we get water. We still have groundwater. I live on a groundwater well out here in the aquifer outside of Tucson. But the thievery that went on, and it was mostly politics. There was a Bureau of Reclamation and the Corps of Engineers, the Army Corps of Engineers. Their real test bed that got it all started was in the 1930s, TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority. I went to college in Tennessee, and I also worked in the tire industry. So Tellico Dam, I'd go down there and we'd work on some of the big equipment and all of that stuff, and it was just horrendous then. But a lot of people got displaced. They did tame a lot of rivers and all of that, but it turned out to be a fair success, and so they used that model to inundate California, because California, it jumped like 300,000, and then 2 years or 5 years later it was up to 1 million people. So it tripled in less than a decade in some populations, and then they really started irrigating San Joaquin Valley, Imperial Valley, and that became the breadbasket of America and for the world. And because they were producing so much, that's what gave them the impetus to go ahead and say, well, we need to take water where we can. They went all the way to San Francisco, and diverted rivers, Kern River, marshlands, tidal flows, everything got discombobulated, and it just kept getting more and more need for water, and it was really urban populations. But whenever they made these projects, they would make sure they always promised the farmers and ranchers their next to nothing acre feet cost, you know. And so they had this expectation that they got it first, and they got it the longest, and everybody else had to wait in line. And that attitude prevailed even until the late years, that even up into when they finally cut off. Well, they dammed the Klamath and Upper Falls and all of that, and so in 2017 or so, they wanted to have dams start coming down, you know, so the poor old fish, they cut populations where there were millions of fish down to a few thousand. It was pitiful. It was absolutely pitiful. And they would pump water over the mountains and thousands of feet high, and then they let the gravity run all the way for miles and miles, all the way down to the middle of California. But the big thing that really enraged a lot of people is they thought, well, we just have to get more and more, and they're all peed off at Canada, because Canada had the Fraser River and the Yukon and all of those, and they really wanted to go up there and get all that water and bring it down to urban populations. So it's like an addiction. It just got worse and worse, you know. And anyways, Idaho's been covered in here. Utah, how they did their conservation areas and all of this. But the biggest, Mexico got screwed out of theirs, and all we gave them was salt water. And that was a big part of farming and irrigation, is when you run the waters off, and the runoff is it picks up salts, and of course there's some lately as pesticides and all that. But perched water means it goes down through the ground, but then it sits on a clay layer that doesn't allow it to drain the way down or get in the aquifer or go anywhere. So they have to put tiles in the fields to pull the water off and move it on. So that's called perched water. And they finally put all that back in. But salts are really a problem with growing. You can find some high salts, and like wheat and barley, they said when you grow those two together, wheat will go away first because of the high salt. It doesn't like it, but barley can tolerate it. So this changes, but the Ogallala aquifer in South Dakota goes all the way down to Texas, and they were pumping that down, and a lot of people pumped groundwater. You know, in Tucson here, we were the second largest municipality next to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, that got its water exclusively from the ground. So people just thought, well, we better start reducing pumping. So the only way they could do that is import water. Then they had to divide it up and who got what. And Arizona wouldn't sign the compact between the several states that started to dam up the Colorado River. There were a lot of fights about that. Environmentalists and good practices just were. What really amazed me though is Bureau of Reclamation and all of those, and the Army and Corps of Engineers went around the rest of the world and exercised our right as a world power by helping other countries dam up their waters and stuff. China had a lot of problems, but that was in the other book. But now the influences of the West is what they talked about just the other day, that the governor of Arizona was selling or trying to get, well, they had already made commitments to give water to the Saudi Arabia. Now how they're going to get water from Arizona to Saudi Arabia is beyond me, but maybe they just buy farmland and grow produce and ship it off. I have no clue, but even today in 2023, we're having reallocations, manipulations, and still fighting over the water, and we're not conserving it. So, like last night, it rained a lot, and so I went around with a bucket and watered what I had to do, and I do water with rainwater because, there's no salt in that, and once it hits the ground, it'll, of course, pick up the salts. So it helps rinse the soil to a point, and the water just gets back into the nature that way. So I use it if I can, and then sparingly well water. A lot of water cultures came from Israel because over there they don't have hardly any water, and they came up with drip irrigation. So we use a lot of drip irrigation out here. Now, in commercial farms, they still don't do that. They still flood those fields and use mechanized farms and fertilizers and stuff. So I don't know what the answer is, but overpopulation, they said by the end of this century, there'll be 10 billion people. How do you feed them all? Start eating less, I guess, and grow your own food. Do what you can. But this is an important book. It's a real history, and the ones that live out here in the West in America really should read this book. It's not outdated just because the author has passed. And there are people that still carry the torch, and people still working on the real issues. So stay tuned and keep watching more. This is Cadillac Desert, the American West and the disappearance of water. By Marc Reisner, and a new afterword by Lawrie Mott. Thanks for watching KRZTV, and conserve water the best you can. Goodbye.